With bacterial diseases, bacterial infections, and in regard to the concept that there is no waste in nature, that's absolutely true. There's an explanation for every bacterial disease or infection. With regard to your dog going to the vet and the vaccines they want to give every year, a lot of the vaccines are for viruses, which we're going to talk about in a separate video. But there are three that are very common that are bacterial diseases that they want to vaccinate for. So we need a better understanding of where these bacterial diseases come from and why they're happening with the concept of no waste in nature to help you make a decision about vaccinating your pet. So the vaccines are Leptospirosis. You may recognize that term. It's very reactive. It makes a lot of dogs sick. Lyme. Most people, at least east of the Mississippi River, have heard of Lyme disease and the Lyme vaccine. And then the kennel cough vaccine is a Bordetella. So Bordetella is kennel cough. So about bacteria, let's understand bacteria first. Bacteria live in poop, period. The end. That's what you need to know about bacteria. If there's a bacterial disease or infection, then that means there's some poop or fecal contamination or some dead, decaying something. That's what bacteria feed off of and live off of. Whenever there's bacteria, it's because there's something dead or there's some poop. So let's talk about that in the body. So whether it's the human body or the dog or the cat, let's talk about where the bacteria and the poop live in the body. So you've heard the term gut. Well, the gut really refers to the entire GI tract. That's from the mouth to the anus, the whole tube that runs through the body from where food goes in to where what's left over comes out. That whole thing is the gut. There's three main sections. The first section up in here is the stomach. Dogs, cats, people, it's all the same. In the stomach, food starts to break down mechanically and digest with acid. And it still kind of looks like food. It's not poop yet. So if you've seen vomit, which everybody's seen vomit, you can still see some food in it. The second phase, kind of in the middle, is the small intestines, where a lot of digestive enzymes are working, and the food looks more like a slime or something. And then the third phase, now at the bottom, is the large intestine, or the colon. It's where the bacteria live, and that's where the poop is formed, and it's where everything becomes poop. If you've heard of the microbiome, the gut microbiome that we cannot live without, that helps us digest foods and digest things we can't digest, that's mainly bacteria, but other things too. And it lives in the colon where the poop is, okay? So that bacteria is feeding off of and processing our food that's basically become poop and helping us get the final vitamins and things out of it that we can't do with our own digestive enzymes. Any food contamination you ever heard of, a meat product or lettuce or something contamination getting recalled. You usually hear of things like E. coli or salmonella or listeria. Those are all bacteria that live in poop. So if you have a food recall for bacterial contamination, it means, hands down, that there was poop contamination in that food. Period. That's the end. There's no getting around it. Pink eye. Pink eye in toddlers and cows can be from a few different things, because pink eye is just conjunctivitis or redness of the eye. But it's usually bacteria, it's usually E. coli, and that comes from poop contamination. That's why it happens to toddlers and cows and not so much in adults. And I don't mean that your toddler actually had poop on his hand or that you have a dirty house. It can be microscopic poop material in the air and being breathed in and on clothes and things. That's why, again, it happens with toddlers, kind of, maybe the elderly, but not so much adults. We don't see it a whole lot in dogs and cats, but it is a disease of cattle too. So that's bacteria, and it's bacteria because there was poop there first. Chickens and turkeys that you buy at the grocery store that are in the big factory farms or the confinement animal feeding operations, they're all on the ground, low to the ground, and they're breathing in poop dust. The dust in the litter on the floor is full of their poop, and it's called fecal particulate matter. So FPM, it's just there's microscopic amounts of poop mixed in with the microscopic dust from the floor that they're breathing in. So these chickens and turkeys in these big chicken houses, they get upper respiratory infections all the time because they're breathing in poop. So they have to be on antibiotics all the time. And that's just another thing in addition to their living situation that makes them unhealthy. The next concept is same line. There was a guy named Béchamp, Antoine Béchamp, back in the 1850s, same time as Louis Pasteur. Pasteur became famous because we pasteurize all of our foods to kill bacteria. Pasteur thought that all bacteria was bad. It just exists to kill us and infect us and cause problems, and we have to kill it all. But Champ thought the opposite, or an opposite cause and effect, that dirty terrain, dirty lifestyle brings in germs and bacteria that then make us sick. And Bechamp's version is right, but Pasteur's version is what became popularized. So Bechamp says, if you have a pile of poop, a bunch of bacteria is going to come in to eat the poop, which is the way it happens because there's no waste in nature. If there's excess amount of poop, then nature is going to create an excess amount of bacteria to eat that poop. And Pasteur is famous for developing the germ theory of disease instead of Bechamp's terrain theory of disease. Pasteur's germ theory says germs are out there to make us sick, not because there's poop, but just because they're out there to make us sick, which doesn't make any sense in nature. So Bechamp's terrain theory works really well for bacterial diseases. There's a little bit more complexity to viruses and other things that we're going to talk about in another video. But for right now, for bacteria, it's a perfect fit. I mention that right now because we often mention bacteria and viruses, or the medical profession, or doctors, or veterinarians. Oh, it's a bacteria virus. You have a head cold, you're sick, whatever, or a stomach bug. Oh, it's a bacteria virus. We just use them like they're the same group of things. And bacteria and viruses are very, very, very different. I'll go into the differences when we talk about viruses, because we've already discussed that bacteria are just there to eat poop and clean up dead material. So here's where we're going to get into it. History of all bacterial diseases. So 200 years ago, Civil War time, before that, 1700s, all the big cities, all the big diseases of industrialization in modern times. So London, Munich, New York City, Chicago, turn of the century industrialization. So many people were moving into the cities and there wasn't room for them, and there was poor housing, and there wasn't sanitation or plumbing yet. There weren't bathrooms in the houses. So everybody's poop was out on the streets. You know, animal poop, human poop, garbage, it was all just out on the streets. People were crowded in. That poop was contaminating the local water supply. So whether you had a well or a creek to get your drinking water from, it was contaminated with poop because poop was everywhere. Poop was in the horse manure, so if it wasn't raining and wet and muddy and it was dry and dusty, that's all floating up in the air just like those chicken houses, fecal particulate matter. So many people during this time lived in basement, street level, like New York and Chicago, housing without windows or screens. So the dust with the horse manure is just floating in their apartment. There's no circulation. So everybody's sick all the time. All these big diseases of the modern industrial period back then, a few hundred years ago, was just breathing in bacteria or eating or drinking bacteria. Okay, so these include all the big famous ones that you've probably heard of. Tuberculosis, diphtheria, almost any gastroenteritis, diarrhea disease, typhoid fever, dysentery, whooping cough, scarlet fever, strep throat, puerperal fever, which is more of dirty hands going in to deliver a baby and causing terrible infection inside the woman that she then dies from. They're all due to poop contamination or some dead tissue contamination in garbage, period. None of these diseases were cured by vaccines, although modern medicine would have you believe that they were all cured by vaccines. There's plenty of resources that clearly show charts and trends and timelines of how these diseases significantly improved just due to sanitation and improved nutrition, improved living conditions, way before anybody introduced the vaccine. But we've just forgotten all that, and now there's all these vaccines out there. Everybody just tells us that the vaccines caused all these diseases to go away. And these diseases went away because we became cleaner and healthier. So here's an example. I'm going to put up a chart. This is for whooping cough or pertussis. There's still a vaccine for that. Many of you have had it. Interestingly, the Bordetella pertussis that causes whooping cough is very, very similar to the Bordetella bronchoseptica that causes kennel cough in dogs. It's all the same stuff, okay? Anyway, this chart shows deaths per 100,000 people from 1920 to 1985, I think. So you can just look at the chart. You can see that even before they started using the whooping cough vaccines in the 40s, the really high amount of whooping cough deaths was already well on its way down. It had already decreased from over 16 per 100,000 people deaths to less than 2 deaths per 100,000 people before they even introduced the vaccine. That's a 90% decline just due to wellness, nutrition, sanitation, lifestyle before they introduced this vaccine. You can see the chart, you can see the curve. The vaccine didn't even make a dent in the curve. The curve continues the same. The vaccine did nothing. So all this means, and there's plenty of other examples like that. That's just an example of a nice chart I could find to show you, but it matches all these other diseases I mentioned earlier. So No waste in nature, bacterial diseases. It all comes down to any bacterial disease or infection means that there's some fecal or decaying dead material contamination, or severe nutritional disease causing something in your body to decay, and then the bacteria comes in to eat it or clean it up. It can be in your body, your food you ate is contaminated with poop, your drinking water is contaminated with poop, or wherever this bacterial infection is, there's a poop contamination. Increased amount of poop, there's no waste in nature. Nature's not going to let that poop go to waste, whether it's in the water or your body. Nature's going to call in some bacteria to digest it and eat it and break it down. So if we just clean up our environment without the fecal contamination, whether it's leptospirosis in the water or E. coli in the food, then we won't have these bacterial diseases and infections. It's that simple, it's that easy. Clean up the poop, the bacteria goes away. That's Bechamp's terrain theory. The bacteria comes in to clean up the poop in the terrain, versus Pasteur's germ theory, that bacteria germs are just out there, out to get us. It doesn't work that way. Now, let's be clear. What's this mean for you and your pet in our modern world? I'm not saying avoid antibiotics or avoid going to the doctor when there's an infection. If you have Lyme or leptobacteria destroying your kidneys or your liver, or your dog's liver or kidneys, you have to have some antibiotics. You have to kill that bacteria before it completely destroys the liver or kidneys, that you cannot live without those organs. That has to be done. You've got to have some antibiotics if they're that sick, okay? But I think you can see that now we know why that infection exists, and we can prevent it in the future, and we take other steps other than just antibiotics to try to become healthier. Hopefully from this you can see that vaccines are not the answer. Vaccines don't address the underlying cause. They make no sense at all when you understand that there's no waste in nature. So vaccines, like the lepto vaccine your vet wants to give, the Lyme vaccine, the Bordetella or kennel cough vaccine, they make no sense. They don't prevent disease. Sanitation and nutrition prevent disease. So there's no waste in nature. Whether there's some contamination in your lungs, your GI tract, your water, and bacteria in there to clean it up, is because nothing goes to waste. That means that you have some poop or decaying material that you have breathed in or eaten or drank. Okay, it's really that simple. Thanks.